Rising. We have a fantastic show for you planned today. I actually did a radar today, so...
Ooh, teacher's pet, gold star, Robby.
Thank you, thank you. We will also hear from Michael Schellenberger, and we will discuss the Wall Street Journal's confirmation of his reporting on COVID-19's patient zero. Plus, a judge in Arkansas actually struck down the state's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. We'll, of course, discuss that later. But first, we've got some developments to get into. Take it away, Bri.
Indeed. Well, Robby, the search is still underway for the missing Titanic tour submersible carrying 5 people in the waters of the North Atlantic. As of this morning, officials say the craft is carrying just 20 hours of breathable oxygen left. Late last night, Canadians conducting military surveillance in the area reported hearing underwater noises they say could indicate the group's continued survival. According to Rolling Stone, U.S. Homeland Security intelligence indicates the noise is a, quote, banging that occurs every 30 minutes.
Meanwhile, reporters have uncovered some troubling signs about the company that owns the doomed submersible, OceanGate. OceanGate's CEO, Stockton Rush, was recorded back in November speaking on the safety of the vessel, quote, "You know, at some point, safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of your bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. At some point, you're going to take some risk. Really is a risk-reward question." Rush is currently on the missing sub. Plus, reporters at the New Republic revealed that OceanGate is currently being sued by a former employee who claims he was terminated after raising concerns that the submersible was incapable of descending to such extreme depths as the Titanic wreck site. Now, meanwhile, a telling 6-month-old CBS report on the sub featuring David Pogue, who I've mentioned before, has gone viral. Let's watch.
Service. An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
Oh, take your shoes off. That's customary.
Okay. Wow. Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button. That's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
The Titan is the only 5-person sub in the world that can reach Titanic depths, 2.4 miles below the sea. It's also the only one with a toilet, sort of. And yet, I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
So the game controller is apparently pretty standard. Gene Park, who's a video game writer for the Washington Post, was saying that's not so weird. I want to use this as an opportunity to pivot to discussing which video game controllers I think are the best design ones. Spoiler, it's the Nintendo GameCube, but this is a serious story, so we'll...
Yeah, I mean, look, Robby, I take that point that a lot of people are making a lot out of the fact of the game controller because it seemed to point to the ad hoc nature and dangerous nature of the submersible. That part, I don't think actually, according to experts, is what was so galling. What's so galling is that there have been a former employee that tried to raise a red flag about the safety risks, the kind of explicitly poor risk assessment that you heard from the OceanGate owner, who is conflating the risk of going down to unfathomable depths in a self-made, uncertified vessel with getting out of bed in the morning or getting into your car. And humans notoriously have terrible personal risk assessments. It's why when Ralph Nader's book, Unsafe at Any Speed, came out and the automotive industry was forced to contend with the safety of its vehicles and put seatbelts and airbags and things like that in cars, a lot of Americans rebelled and were angry and said, I should be allowed to not wear a seatbelt. I should be allowed to drink in cars and drink while I'm not wearing a seatbelt with my kid on my lap. And it's not because people are wanting bad things to happen to them, but we don't have a good sense of what the risk reward of a lot of longer term, especially longer term planning things are in our life. It's also why we have things like Social Security that kind of nudge us into the direction of saving for retirement. And now we see exactly what happens when you shirk the kinds of regulations that are applied to these vehicles under the normal course of things that are intended to keep folks safe.
Right, but this is out somewhere where the regulations don't apply, and you can do whatever you want, and you can take on these risks. And they knew the risk getting into the tiny, claustrophobic, enclosed space that they were going to drop 2.5 miles into the ocean, and they did that. I would never do that. I think most people would have a fear of that, but obviously people have taken this journey before and survived. James Cameron, the Titanic director, I was looking at it after we talked about this yesterday, has done it a bunch of times, over and over and over again. And I guess, I was seeing someone saying on Twitter that, think of all the discovery is dangerous, right? I mean, they said, Columbus, no, you're going to fall off the earth and, zoom off into space if you go over the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. And that's how America was discovered. And the Antarctic exploration was dangerous. Arctic exploration was dangerous. A lot of those people died. So
I think the analogy would be if an expert shipbuilder, top of his class, top of his field in 1492 went to Christopher Columbus and said, the ship that you're planning to take this unprecedented ocean voyage has some pretty identifiable flaws and has not been certified by the ship experts at the time.
I mean, they effectively did do that because they told him that, his theory for what would happen was wrong. He didn't have enough because he thought he was going to make it all the way to India.
No, I'm not talking about how much meat and food you pack on the ship. I'm talking about the ship itself, what we know about the physics of ocean travel, that even if you're going to be on the water for a day or a week, I'm telling you that the design here has issues and you need to have them looked at. They're identifiable before you even disembark, issues with this craft, and you should have it certified by experts. And he says, nah, I'm good, dog. I've done this before. And I think that's the problem here. It's that there were red flags that were raised about this particular craft by employees who were then fired for having the gall to actually raise those kinds of safety risks. And I wonder if the individuals who signed their liability waivers before getting into there, including a 19-year-old kid or young man, were really aware of exactly what risk they were assuming when they got into the craft.
I'm sorry, they're going to the bottom of the ocean. They have to know it's risky. And that
I'm saying specifically, did they know that there was an employee who specifically raised concerns about the risk of the craft and was fired so that the company didn't actually have to engage in those risks and remedying those problems with the craft?
I mean, it's under no circumstances is it going to be entirely safe, just like it's not entirely safe to get in a rocket and go into space. These are uncharted territories. It is an inherently risky thing to do, and I don't know that maybe there were really egregious, negligent safety protocols here, and that should be more fully explored. Obviously, we're wasting resources now to try to find this thing, which I think is as I said when we discussed this yesterday, I think it's extremely unlikely. Obviously, everyone can hope for the best, but it seems very unlikely to me they'll find it. But I think it's a dangerous, risky thing to do, and if you want to undertake that, that's your choice. But
from a legal perspective, the concept of assumed risk hinges on the disclosure of what the actual risks are. And I think we obviously have to understand that if I tell you, yeah, getting on a roller coaster is risky, but you assume the risk when you get on it, versus this roller coaster has been condemned, and experts in roller coasters say you should not get on this ride, it's going to crumble at any moment. Those are two different things. So the issue is not the inherent risk of the activity. The issue is whether or not there were additional risks that were not fully disclosed. And moreover, for the company to have the hubris to know that you're engaging in an inherently risky behavior and ignore the red flags that are being raised. This is exactly why many people believe that there should be something called strict liability when you're engaging in very, very risky behavior. Like, I don't know, transporting toxic chemicals in a train across Ohio and Pennsylvania. Because at the end of the day, there are, some activities are so inherently dangerous that when there are these spillover effects that affect populations and communities, et cetera, they should be forced to pay as opposed to be able to say, well, sometimes that's just the bag.
Right, those are harms to third persons, to uninvolved people.
Yeah.
The people who got in that submersible, I mean, I think it's on them. I think they knew what they were getting into, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, well, there's ample evidence, including in this piece in the New York Times yesterday, that really go through all of the warnings that the OceanGate company was alerted to as to the safety issues involved. OceanGate's director of marine operations, David Lockridge, this is from the article, started working on a report, according to court documents, ultimately producing a scathing document in which he said the craft needs more testing and stressed the potential dangers to passengers of the Titan as the submersible reached extreme depths. 2 months later, OceanGate faced similarly dire calls from more than 36 people, industry leaders, deep-sea explorers, and oceanographers, who warned in a letter to its chief executive, Stockton Rush, the person on the submersible, that the company's experimental approach and its decision to forego a traditional assessment could lead to potentially catastrophic problems with the Titanic mission. Obviously, we'll continue to keep reporting on this as we learn more and see if in the next 24 hours or so the people on that craft are able to be rescued.
More rising after this.